We're going to look at gold, silver, a little bit of FX in this video this week. Obviously, we just had payrolls come and go. The much anticipated payrolls number, which in my opinion just solidified the fact that the Fed are going to go 25, not 50. So let's look at how we've washed up after that and think about what we can do next week. So we should just quickly brush over the payrolls number because, as people quite wrongly pointed out, it was not the most important number of a generation. It was just a number, and the Fed were never going to cut rates 50 basis points and spook the entire market on the back of one print. So, I mean, look what we've got here. Average hourly earnings was a little bit stronger. The non-farm change was a tad weaker. The unemployment rate actually fell. So what does all that mean? Well, what it means is there won't be 50. There was never going to be 50, and I don't know why people were suggesting that. I'll stick with that. But it was a mixed bag. In terms of the US dollar, I think it just sort of now means that people are not very sure. So just looking at the US dollar or the dollar index, we were talking about, or looking at this, trying to get back to this push. So we didn't quite make the retracement of this pivot. Now, if you want to go ferreting down through the smaller time frames, for example, here we are on a 30-minute, you could go back and say, okay, well, here's the first move. We sort of broke, so we come off this pivot. And if we do that, we didn't get any more retracements through. Oh, maybe we got one there, so maybe you've got to come off that pivot. You get the point, right? You can go down to the infinite degree, but you could make the point that you can use that pivot instead of this one, and you get the retracement, and you're still looking for the measured move lower. Semantics, I don't think it really matters. As we go back out here, we're still looking at this sort of these areas down here. So look, I think we will get there. What that number doesn't change the thinking in terms of the Fed. You're still going to get the 25-point cut. You're just not going to get the 50. So it depends how many of these lunatics position for 50, which I think was a crazy thing to do. But have they been shaken out enough yet? So we're going to know, into next week as the dust settles. But for right now, my general feeling here is still going to be that we're just going to do that again, and this trend is going to continue on. Now, there's a couple of little telltales here, just Elliott-wise, that I'm just being wary of. So I would sort of, even though I don't particularly like to use Elliott wave on this, I would be thinking, okay, we've got one wave, two wave, we've got an extended wave down. Is that three? So does that mean we're going to get some sort of four like this, and then we get a five, and then we get a more major bounce? So I'm just looking at that, and I'm just cognizant of, a little bit hard to see it, just fix that. I'm just cognizant of this, okay, that the RSI on the daily is just a little bit low. It's just a warning flag. It's not like a trade signal or anything like that. It's just like I'm just looking at this going, okay, well, I'll just be aware here that this could bottom out and have a more major pronounced bounce. Okay, now something that one thing that could lead to that is that the Fed aren't nearly as dovish as everyone says, because remember, the markets, in my opinion, is way overpriced for rate cuts. I think it's going to be a slow and steady process, and I think once we get to that meeting, if the Fed sort of relay that they're going to be slow and steady, well, then you're going to see a reasonable bounce in the US dollar, and if that happens, then the metals are going to get onto the back foot a little bit. So we're looking at this in the yen. So this has come down and made its measured move. It didn't break the low, okay? So and that's kind of, it's almost a double bottom, but it's the same thing here, right? We're almost getting divergence. So I am just a little bit wary of any sort of surprising US dollar strength that may come through, because there are a few little things out here telling us to just be a little bit careful. Okay, so this has done its measured move, so the next thing now is to just track the bottom of this. So what I'm saying is, if I start to see, say, something like the dollar yen start to break this top, then I'm looking at gold and silver and thinking, okay, just be a little bit careful about your overall view. You may need to modify it. The euro here still looks constructive, but we didn't reach the retracement of this swing. So once again, I'd be just wondering if we can do that. I'm not sure, but of course, if you come on a more aggressive pivot, we did make it back to that retracement zone. So does that mean we are headed back up here? And you can see now where the measured move target sits, which is right on top of this peak. So it's not hard to envisage that the euro might do this and stop. Okay, and then does that mean then that we get that sort of five waves that in the dollar index, and that we come in for a more major correction, and the US dollar finds its feet? I'm certainly aware of that. That's all I'm trying to point out here at the moment. I'm definitely aware that the US dollar could find a more significant bottom soon. Okay, so just moving over to gold here. And last week we were talking. This is where we sort of were last week, talking about, well, we've got a little bit of a range in here with this hold, and I was sort of thinking, ooh, maybe we're going to actually get a little bit of a larger range like this, and this is what's proven to happen. So we've just come in a couple of times now and retested old resistance becoming new support. So this to me, this looks like a pretty decent area now, and you can see why, because you come back, you tie all that in. But at the same time, look at the tops we've got here now. Okay, so we're in a real battle zone in gold. Okay, because we've got multiple tops here, and we've got multiple tests here. So this is a range, and I don't know how this resolves. Okay, so this is the problem now, right? So I've had this Elliott count, but I'm sort of looking at this now, thinking, okay, well, this sort of market's beginning to really extend into this sideways motion. This could break the whole countdown, and I'm going to have to come and tear this up and do something else, and that's fine. That Elliott is made to be changed, in my opinion. It is very much hindsight. It just means that you got 1, 2, 3. You're expecting a sideways movement, and that's what we got, and that's what you use it for. It's like, okay, well, I would think that this is going sideways. Now it is. So look, I think here it's pretty straightforward. You've got a pretty well defined zone here. And we just got to wait for it to one side to break. But when one side breaks, it should be a pretty tremendous break. Now my money is still on a break higher, but this is now what I would look for, right? Because if this is going to play Elliott for me, I would be thinking that the next top is going to be pretty pivotal. All right. Because of what I'm seeing in the currencies, in FX, in the US dollar, I'm just looking at this going, okay, well, this could be quite pivotal. The other problem, of course, is that the overall stock market is not doing so hot, okay, and that is just causing a bit of a risk-off environment, which could certainly hurt gold and silver. So I'm going to probably just adjust that trend line a little bit while I'm talking here. So, it's straightforward, right? All we really got to do now is sort of, just watch and see. I mean, there's no trade here for me. This is not a trading. Look, you could have done little trades in here, but this is not a great trading setup for me until it gets either side of this pretty established range. Okay, this is a 4 hour, so this range has been going on now for quite a while. I mean, this is a week's range that we've been stuck right in. Okay, and the payrolls number didn't really resolve it. Okay, so just as it sits, I mean, just thinking about this, the length of wave 1 projected off the wave 4 on a 1-to-1 basis would give us wave 5 up here. Okay, so that is one way to look at it, to just sort of set rough targets, but you've got to sort of think, is there anything else that lines up with that? We'll just think about range expansion. Okay, so what I'm saying here is that this range, okay, 100% of that range would put us right into that same zone. Okay, so for me, I'm expecting that this will break the top, but it could break the bottom. There's no doubt. But if this breaks the top like I'm expecting, and this is what this could be the start of it, right? This could be 1, 2. We could get 3, 4, 5 like that. If I see that, I am not a buyer there. I'm definitely not a buyer at this level. I'm a seller. Whether or not I go short there is a different question. But I'm definitely not initiating fresh longs here. That would be, in my opinion, a bad place to initiate fresh longs. Now, it could go further, no question about it. It could go like that, and it turns out that was a good place to initiate fresh longs, but I don't know that. All I'm knowing is just looking at this going, okay, well, if this gets up here, that's a zone I'm interested in. So just shy of that 2600, sort of call it 2595, sort of around there. That is the point of call for me in gold next week if this breaks. Now, that's one thing, because the other thing is, if this breaks this way, I'm coming back and I'm re-examining all. In fact, I'm probably throwing this out. Okay, I'm probably just going, this looks wrong. I've got to think of something else. If it breaks this way, well, the range expansion, 100% of this is down right down here, which will line up with the 50% retracement off the bottom here, round about there. That would be, at that point, that's where I'd be looking at thinking about going long if this broke. Okay. Could you go short if this broke? I think you probably could for a trade. The safer way, though, would be to let this break, let this retest, try to sell that, okay, and then look for some sort of move down here. Ideally, you would hope for a measured move lineup. Okay, so what I mean by that is you would hope that if this broke, yeah, look at that. So that would be ideal. Okay, if this broke and that was this broke down to here, this was the bounce back up to test, and then you would look to that. That would be pitch perfect. It almost certainly will not happen that way, but that would be the general idea of how I would look to trade this if the range broke down. So once again, I'm not expecting that, but look, that's my plan if it does happen, and that's all you've really got to do, right? You just got to have a plan in place. If this happens, I'm going to look for that and then try to get that. And if I'm going to look for this area because there's a lot lining up here for that to be. That's how I would do it. The danger is, of course, that you don't retrace and then you just get a very swift movement down. And if that's the case, well, that's right. You just missed out. You just wait for the next opportunity. But once again, I'm expecting the top side more than the downside. I have a plan either way. Okay, just going to jump over here to look at silver. So this is the area that we were looking for last week, which is we've tagged it. But the movement since then has been a little bit betwixt and between for me. I'm kind of looking at this going, okay, well, we sort of hit this retracement area, but, obviously after payrolls, we've had this big dump, which has actually made a fresh low. So that sort of makes me think, ooh, okay, all right. Look, the main structure of the trade is still there, but I'm looking at the opposing forces now. So I'm looking at this. So look, what I'm looking at is this move back to here. Okay, so I'm just sort of thinking about that and going, okay, well, what is that kind of telling us there? So for me, I'm kind of, okay, I'm just looking at this going, okay, well, what have I got here? So what we've got, ignoring the larger structure, which of course is sort of that, taking that out of account. And what I might even do here is, actually, no, I'll just leave it here. But of course, when you look at this, we have a pretty good area here where we had some support here, and that's become resistance right into that zone. And we've had a very strong reaction away on the back of payrolls. There's definitely going to have to be some more dust to settle here before we can really make sense of what's going on. The one thing I'm looking at, though, I've got to sort of, there's nothing, we'll put it this way, there's nothing here that's a telltale sign for me to think, yes, this is definitely what I want to do. For me, I'm still just looking at this going, I'm trapped between these two sort of zones, and obviously we're right down here. So we've kind of double tested here. But I need to see something a little bit more concrete. See, the problem is now, originally you would sort of go, okay, well, maybe I'm finished down here, I've gone up. I was looking for that, but because we've made this fresh low, that's kind of off the table, and that's why it's not very clear. Now, I did point out last week that we had these areas of divergence that came in here that peaked out. So what this kind of plunge, it's a little bit difficult because this plunge is just like one big thing. It's not like a steady working down, but we do have, as it sits, a bit of divergence there, okay, but it's not concrete. I wouldn't be leaning super hard into that just yet. I'm just looking at that, going, okay, well, I'm cognizant of that. We haven't really broken above 60 yet, so okay, but yeah, I'm standing aside in silver. At least for this week, until I get something a little bit more concrete about what's going on here. Because even looking at this as an Elliott structure, I think I talked about this week that this looked pretty good as a 1, 2, sort of 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that was cool, and coming off, that sort of made sense. Now, the Elliott makes sense here up until that point. At that point, you're going, okay, yeah, 1, 2, 3 back. That's all right. What do I expect next? I would anticipate a 1, 2, and then, but we didn't get that. So that's kind of clouded it because this has come out, right? Because that's come down and broken that low. And the other thing that became problematic for the count is that we came up and we got through that. Pardon me, we got through this low here on the high side. So that disqualifies that as being part of one overall impulse. So yes, the Elliott, I'm putting it aside. I just don't have anything super clear in silver. I just think we lean into gold. We let that tell us what we need in terms of, will silver follow it? But this big plunge, the dust is going to have to settle here. So yeah, look, the other thing too that you've got to keep in mind is that we are still in an overall small downtrend. Okay, so we haven't broken the swing structure. We've still got lower highs. Okay, and now we've got another lower low. So we still need to see at a very basic level that. Okay, we just need that higher low. Once we sort of get that, we can start working backwards and going, okay, can we start to put this together a different way that makes a bit of sense? Can we start structuring up a trade that going forward that we can logically lean into? So I don't think it's there right yet. I think you just watch gold. When gold breaks out of that range, one way or the other, I think that'll probably be the opportunity to pounce in silver, because I wouldn't call that a range just yet. I don't think it's formed up well enough to call that a range. This potentially could end up being a double bottom. And if it does end up being, well, it's not a double bottom exactly, but if it does end up starting to give us something like that, well, you sort of come out, look, this sort of held, and we're a little bit through the retracement area, but generally speaking, we came in to test this structure, we held, we had another big crack at it, we're pushing away. Okay, at that point, yes, you can think about something else. So look, I think I'll just leave it there for silver. I'm just going to keep my hands off it for the next week, I think, and just watch gold and see what happens there. So that's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye for now.